I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying our discussion with Elisha. It's been fun. This is our third week, and the first week we talked about this idea of the transition from Elijah to Elisha, and how Elisha was the next man up, and how he had to take the cloak and the mantle and step into those things that his predecessor and his mentor were doing. And so his mentor's ceiling was really the floor of where Elisha was going to begin. And last week we talked about this fascinating story about the Shunammite woman and Elisha. And we talked about this idea that when we have things that we believe have died, we need to go to God with them. And we need to get undignified. And if you could remember, really cute story, watching the sermon with Benjamin on my bed. We were just kind of reviewing it, and he's watching it along. And I think it's kind of cool when your 13-year-old, 12 or 13-year-old wants to watch your sermon with you. I thought that was pretty interesting. And so he's getting a little antsy, but we haven't got to the really cool part where I take my tie off. And so I was like, no, buddy, just stay here for one more minute. Like, you're going to like this part, you know? And he laughed and giggled, and that was a little dad-son moment there. But anyways, and so you got to get undignified. When you believe something's died within you and died around you, you need to go to God with it and get undignified and go ahead and walk back into that situation with God. Not alone, but go back into the situation with God and allow God to do what he promises to do. And if you remember in the story, the Shunammite woman comes back with Elisha to her dead son in Elisha's room, and Elisha goes into the room with the dead son, but everyone else is on the outside of the door. And I told you that we need to allow things to stay with God and trust God that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And the story ends as I pray, and I know your story ends. And that is the door opens up. There is a day when the door will open up, and restoration, resuscitation, resurrection will be yours. And so that was last week's sermon. But this week we're in 2 Kings chapter 6. And just as cool a story as the Shunammite woman story. And I've entitled this message, I Spy with My Little Eye. So Elisha finds himself in the middle of a battle between Israel and Aram. And it's really the Syrians. And so he's in the middle of this battle. They're going to war. They're plotting against each other. And they're at an act of war. And Elisha finds himself in the middle of a conflict. And here's what I want you to write down. If you're a note taker, write this down. We may face situations beyond our readiness and reserves, but never beyond God's resources. We may face situations beyond our readiness and reserves, but never beyond God's resources. So the city is Dothan. And this city is actually a canonical, that's the word I learned this week. It's basically a city that or a town that kind of sits up on a hill, and it's just kind of perched on the top, and there really is no safety. It's just kind of perched up there by itself. It's isolated on a hillside in a wide open plain, and it's easily surrounded by the enemy. And this is where Elisha and his friend find themselves, and this is where they're hanging out for the time being. And so it says that Elisha's servant, and we're not sure if this is the same guy that ran around with Elisha when he was with the Shunammite woman, but it's an unnamed assistant, an unnamed servant, and it says he rises early in the morning. And he wakes up, and maybe Elisha's not even up yet, or Elisha's just sipping coffee at this point, but he wakes up and he looks out the door, and he sees that we're surrounded. He sees that the enemy that he easily can recognize is surrounding them on every side. He realizes that they have company and the people don't look happy. And he runs back to Elisha, and he's really, really concerned. Now, beyond Elisha being the prophet extraordinaire, he also appears to be the head of the CIA for Israel. because he is finding out information and he's relaying all of this information that he receives from God back to the king of Israel. And so God is hearing what Aram, the king of Aram, is doing in his bedroom, it says, and he's discerning that. He's understanding their plans. He is revealing that to Elisha, and Elisha is going and telling the king of Israel. And so every time Aram, the Syrians, want to do something to attack the Israelites, they already know what they're going to do. They already understand what the plan is, or what the ambush looks like, or what the situation's going to look like. And so they realize that if they're going to win this war, if the Syrians are going to win this war, they got to take out the prophet. They got to take out the guy that knows the plans. And so in verse 11, we have a sneak peek of a conversation that the king of Aram is having with his highest associates. He's saying, listen, one of you clowns is leaking the playbook, and I need to know who it is. Who's the traitor among us? And what one wise advisor to the king of Aram says is, it's none of us, sir. It's this prophet Elisha. For some reason, he's receiving everything that we're doing, and he's relaying that information to the Israelites. And so they realize that if they have any chance to win this war against the Israelites, they've got to take out the prophets. And so we return back to our story in verse 15 of 2 Kings chapter 6. And we see this poor apprentice freaking out. He's pleading with Elisha to have some emotion. Don't you realize that we're surrounded on every side? This day is going to be the day of disaster. This is going to be a tragic day. We have despair. We're surrounded on every side, and there's no way we can escape. He has panic. He senses impending disaster. He says, there's no use. There's nothing that can help us now. He has a defeated mentality. Let me tell you what that looks like in our day and age. I learned this term recently. It's called future tripping. When we get so animated and excited and distressed over the future and what we believe is going to happen, we're basically tripping over the future. And it's not helpful in any way. And that's exactly what this assistant is doing. He has already decided what the outcome of the war is going to be. He already knows that their impending defeat is coming, and it's right on the doorstep. He's future tripping. And here's the first thing I kind of want to say to us. That in no way is helpful. That's in no way helpful. And I know all of us, we're almost wired to future trip. We're all almost always thinking ahead and how the worst case scenario is going to come to pass in our life. We're already generating in our mind what the outcome's going to be ever before we experience it. And that's exactly what this assistant is doing that day. And it's a natural emotion of fear. But what happens is that natural emotion of fear translates into helplessness, which is reasonable. And I'm not saying in any way that future tripping or panicking is somehow unreasonable, because it's very reasonable when you see only what you can see. You see the facts. You see the surrounding army. You see and you know the truth about what you can see. And you begin to panic. But you're only able to see the material, the physical dangers, the enemies that you can see. But what I want us to know is that there was only one gentleman panicking in this situation. Elisha was the absolute opposite. He was as cool as the other side of the pillow. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I mean? Like when it's like, you know, like you flip your pillow over because it's really cool on the other side. That was Elisha. Dude was as cool as the other side of the pillow. He was quiet. He was confident. He was centered in God's immediate presence. He was unperturbed. He was undisturbed because you want to know why Elisha was unperturbed and undisturbed? We find it in verse 16. Don't be afraid, he says. See, Elisha's going to tell us the very reason why he's so calm. He says, "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, come on, this upstart first in his graduating class knows just short of everything apprentice must have been saying to his mentor, "You're crazy. I know how to do math. Me and you makes 2. They make 50,000. I know likey our chances. There's 2 of us. There's 50,000 of them. I'm not sure about you, but where I come from, those are not good odds." But see, the apprentice was looking at the physical. He was looking at the flesh and blood. The numbers didn't lie to him. Or maybe they did. It appeared to be an absolute contradiction of facts. And so in response to this statement of there are more with us than are with them, Elisha decides to just pray. He's going to stop the conversation with this confused assistant, and he begins to pray. But what does he pray about? I mean, there's several options that he could pray about. The first option I thought of is he says, "Lord, transport us off this mountain like those people in that State Farm commercial." You know the State Farm commercial? State Farm, is it State Farm, babe? Yeah, State Farm, and then they just get, transported to somewhere else. He didn't pray that. He didn't pray, "Lord, just take us off this mountain like you take those people off the State Farm commercial." He didn't pray, "Lord, defeat this army." He didn't pray, "Lord, give us the strength we need to defeat this army." No, what does he pray? In verse 17, what he really prays is, "Lord, open his eyes so he can see." Open his eyes so he can see. See what? His death in HD? He's not praying that God will open his eyes so that he can see the spear or the sword coming in high definition. He's praying that this man, this assistant, will see the help, will see the solution, will see God in his midst. See, because when the servant opened his eyes, or when the eyes of the servant were opened, what he saw was chariots of fire and horses surrounding the entire city. He sees the angelic army that is not normally visible. See, what the king of Syria or Aram may have intended to capture Elisha, God had arranged for their safety. And I think it's very interesting and it should not be overlooked. The very same means that the king of Syria or Aram used is the very same means that God brings in their defense. They brought horses and chariots. God brought horses and chariots. Every Syrian horse or chariot that had come to harm was duplicated by a heavenly steed that had come to save. We're getting somewhere, church. Stay with me. It's too good to fall asleep. The enemy could send nothing against him which God could not match. Can I get an amen? There is nothing the enemy can bring into your life that God cannot match. Even when it seems that Satan is more ingenious and more mighty than ever, he's adapting himself with such nice skill to each particular age and phase of life, and it looks like the tide might have just turned towards the enemy. Church, we need to open our eyes so that we can see that every evil advance is exactly met and matched at every turn by the hosts of God. See, there is no denying that the powers of darkness are trying to pull us down. But what we fail to remember and see too often is that the powers of light are pulling us up. And that we have that which can overcome evil on our side. Elisha does not pray to change the situation, but requests that his servant can actually see the reality of the situation. This gentleman needed to see that which was really going on. Not just what he could see in the physical world, not just what he could see with his senses, but what was really going on. And so God pulls back the curtain just for a minute to show him the heavenly armies that are around, the support that is available and always active in his life. See, God could have tried to explain it to him. Elisha could have tried to sit him down on the rock and give him step by step of how God protecting. But he instead says, I'm going to show you for a minute. Because when we open our eyes to the reality of God's protection, it will silence our fears. See, the clearer sight we have of the sovereignty and the power of heaven, the less we shall fear the calamities of this earth. I want you to know that both of these statements are true. You are indeed under constant surveillance from the enemy. There is no way around this on this earth. On this side of heaven, you will be under constant surveillance of the enemy. But I also want you to know, as this story so beautifully depicts, we are equally under constant and superior protective custody with God. Now, again, we did this last week, and we're going to do it again. We're going to get head nods, but I want it to trickle from your head down into your soul. You are under constant surveillance by the enemy, but you are under equally constant protective custody with God. What if what was most real was what you couldn't see? See, that seems so counter what we truly believe, that it's not real if I can't see it. If I can't see it, I won't believe it. But what if reality, the truest reality, is that which you can't see, as opposed to what you can see? Asking God for eyes to see the truest nature of his reality. And I believe, and I'm about to show you, that reality is most real when in the invisible and the spiritual. What if most of what's happening in this universe you can't even see? What if in what is most real you're not even aware of? Because see, there are many things that are too small or too fast or too slow for us to see. And so in this most recent age of modern technology, we've been able to speed up what is too small or slow down what is too fast. Well, make larger what is too small, slow down what is too fast, and speed up what is too slow. And there is a filmmaker, Louis Schwarzenberg, who has created some stunning video of images of some of these things. And I want to just show you this and keep in mind what we're talking about, because he's certainly not talking about what we're talking about, but we're going to steal what he's saying and show you how it applies to what we're doing.
What is the intersection between technology, art, and science? Curiosity and wonder. Because it drives us to explore, because we're surrounded by things we can't see. And I love to use film to take us on a journey through portals of time and space, to make the invisible visible. Because what that does, it expands our horizons, it transforms our perception, it opens our minds, and it touches our heart. So here are some scenes from my 3D IMAX film, Mysteries of the Unseen World. There is movement which is too slow for our eyes to detect, and time-lapse makes us discover and broaden our perspective of life. We can see how organisms emerge and grow, how a vine survives by creeping from the forest floor to look at the sunlight. And on the grand scale, time-lapse allows us to see our planet in motion. We can view not only the vast sweep of nature, but the restless movement of humanity. Each streaking dot represents a passenger plane, and by turning air traffic data into time-lapse imagery, we can see something that's above us constantly but invisible: the vast network of air travel over the United States. We can do the same thing with ships at sea. We can turn data into a time-lapse view of a global economy in motion. We're giants, and we're unaware of things that are too small for us to see. The electron microscope fires electrons, which creates images which can magnify things by as much as 1,000,000 times. This is the egg of a butterfly. And there are unseen creatures living all over your body, including mites that spend their entire lives dwelling on your eyelashes, crawling over your skin at night. Can you guess what this is? Shark skin. A caterpillar's mouth. The eye of a fruit fly. An eggshell. A flea. A snail's tongue.
Maybe what we can't see is most real. See, our limited ability to see the awesome and intricate details of the things in the physical world, which I just showed you, reminds us that our ability to see and understand what's happening in the spiritual realm is equally limited. So do you see the connection that the servant was panicking and could not see what God was truly doing around him? Just similar to what we can't see is very real. God is at work all around us doing things more wonderful than we can imagine and we can see. Our spiritual vision is limited and we cannot see them. And it requires the F word. It requires faith. Faith is to sight and reason what the microscope is to the naked eye. Now I'm going to say it again so you can hear it. Faith is to sight and reason what the microscope is to the naked eye. Faith brings the distant near, makes the spiritual most real. Faith knows God is working behind the scenes, specifically an unseen army around us. I mean, what difference would that make in our life as you go to work tomorrow or you have that difficult conversation next week? What difference would it make to know that there is a mighty army around you that is there for you, assigned to you, to support you? Faith is a grip on reality, not fantasy or even imagination, which are both fiction. I love an imagination, and I have a great imagination, but it's fiction. Fantasy, fiction. Faith, reality. Faith will cross the threshold between the sensed and the invisible or undetectable. See, fear makes us feel weak and helpless and causes us to think that we are alone in this world. But God has assured us that His Spirit is greater within us than is in the world. Isn't that what John 4:4 says? You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. I pray that these scriptures that you've heard before just start exploding in your mind and your heart today. See, the manifestation of the angel armies is the miracle. The momentary unveiling of what always was and would be after the curtain was drawn back. I mean, it's not just that mighty angel army showed up in that moment, but it was that they were always there and that God allowed it to be seen for just a couple of seconds. So I don't want you to think that they showed up for that specific event. They were always there, but we just got a glimpse in this story. And I've never preached a sermon, honestly, about angels. And I was intrigued, and maybe we'll circle back to this in weeks and months to come. But I want to share just briefly about this angel army, these hosts of God. They were invisible, innumerable, and invincible. What if we understood that about God's presence, and more specifically, God's angel armies that are around us every day, walking and talking, and they were assigned to you? That there is an angel army assigned to you. You may leave and go, your husband may go to work, and you may go to this place, or the kids may go to school, and you go over here. But in our family, tomorrow morning, 5 angel armies will go out. And they will be there with Ben and Brooke and Gavin and Susie and myself. And they're there, and they're assigned to me. See, one of the primary duties of the angels is to attend to our needs. And if you don't believe me, let me read the scriptures to you. Hebrews 1:14. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? That's you. The angels are assigned to you. Hebrews 1:14. Are not all angels ministering spirits? I just read that to you. Psalm 91:11. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. Church, this is good news. Psalm 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Come on, listen. Who's heard that scripture before? Raise your other hand if it has more meaning today. Right? Now we understand what it means to encamp, because Elisha showed us for just a couple of seconds what it looks like. That when you feel like you're surrounded, when fear is consuming you on every side, there's an angel army that is assigned to you. Whenever we become discouraged by the evil we can see, we need to think instead about the good work God is doing that we cannot see. When we're tempted to fear, aren't we tempted to fear what we cannot understand and control? See, the things you can control, you're not afraid of. But see, the things you can't control, the things you don't have full understanding about, those are the things that you're tempted to fear about. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But we must, like Elisha, find our security in God's visible and invisible working on our behalf. Romans 8:31. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? Come on, that's just got to be like popping in your head now. That makes so much more sense now. I want you to know that just like this servant in this story and Elisha, every day I believe that there are people around you sending up these intercessions that you don't even know about. Just like the servant had no idea what Elisha was praying over him in that moment, I believe that there are people every day, all day long, sending up intercessions heavenward, carrying often the ripest of faith and love for you. There are people standing in the gap for you even when you don't know it. The remaining part of this story is still very, very good, and I just want to briefly share it with you, but it's really not the center of our text this morning. But what happens is, as they go ahead and this man's eyes are open and he sees the angel armies, it's not just an idle declaration. They actually then go out of the house and they go down into the valley. They go down into the valley to meet up with the enemy, and the enemy then is struck with blindness. So on the one hand, Elijah prays that someone's eyes would be open, but then immediately upon encountering the enemy, he prays that they would be blinded. And so they're blinded, and he says, listen, follow me, and I will take you to the place where that man that you're looking for is, which just turns out to be him. And so he takes them to Samaria, which the king of Israel is there. And when he gets there, the king of Israel thinks, man, we did it. You have delivered them into my hands. Let's kill them. And Elisha says, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to give them clemency. We're going to pardon them. There's all kinds of political jokes that could be inserted right here. But I'm not a political guy, so I'm going to back up. But that's exactly what they do. They say, all's forgotten. We're going to build you a great feast and give you all the things that you want to drink, and we're going to send you back home. Now, without the person you came looking for, but we're going to send you back home. And we're going to love on you. And there's going to be peace in the land. Proverbs 25, 21 and 22 says this: if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. That's exactly what Elisha does in this situation. The very enemy that was coming to get him and kill him, he turns around and heaps burning coals on his head and sends him home. So the conclusion of the message is this: I want you to know that God is indeed between you and your temptations. He is between you and the hate of men for you. He is between you and the pursuers of your past. There is an invisible wall of protection around every single one of you. Your chest should just get a little bit more puffed out. You should have your shoulders a little further back when you walk out of here today, because you're protected. You're walking with an army. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon forged against you will prevail. You will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. You've heard that scripture before too, haven't you? Just boom. That's what it means. Church, we need to recognize not only just the danger, but the deliverance. And that's the hard part. We're so good at recognizing the dangers. We're so good at future tripping in what's going to happen and what's impending and what's inevitable and what's going to be our demise, and it's over. It's all falling apart. It's going to explode. It's going to implode. Tomorrow's going to be different than today. Oh! And God just wants you to not just recognize the danger. He wants you to recognize the deliverance. 1 Corinthians 2:9. Kind of went crazy with the scriptures today, sorry. However, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. Man, that's good. See, God doesn't parade his power. And I think we wish he would, right? Like, we wish he would be like a little bit more boisterous with his power, like, boom! You know what I mean? We want him to let's just be honest, right? We want him to reveal himself to the enemies. See, that's not what happened in this story, and I skipped over that part way back in the beginning of the message. But what if it would be the other way around? What if God would have just pulled back the curtain and not shown Elisha or his servants that the angel army was there, but it would show the enemy, hey, you're done. Look at these people. See, I think this is just Bryce theology and Bryce commentary here. So this is not biblical in any way. So do not write this down and tell anybody else about it. This is just for us. Is that I think if God would have done that, if he'd have just pulled back the veil and let the enemy army see the angel army, it would have been really cool. They would have got out of there. The angel army would have ran away. But Elisha and the servant would have been no different. They would have just thought, oh, you know what? Yeah. Whoop, pew. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's nothing there. So let's just be honest, okay? But they would have thought there was something there, right? And they would have been no different. But see, showing the angel army to the servant and to Elisha changed them forever. It didn't just change that one event that day. It changed them forever. And so I just want you to know that God does not parade his power. It is unseen both by foe and friends, but is always ready for immediate exercise. I want you to know that. Even though you may not be able to see it until you need it, it's there. All right, let's bring this in for a landing. So church, what's your city of Dothan? Who's the enemy army surrounding you? And where could God open your eyes to the support and the love that he's showing you? See, because there's no circumstances so dark and no condition so extreme to be beyond divine help. God's resources are always near, far more powerful and far more numerous than those of any adversary. I'm going to ask the worship team to come back. And I want to talk just directly in our time of response in three areas. Number one, I think it's very, very possible, and maybe you would agree with me, to listen or to see something. You just listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and listen, or hear and hear and hear and hear and hear and hear. And then there comes a day when you really hear it. You know, I've been hearing it my whole life, but there's something different about today. Or there's something different about that one time. And I wonder if that's today for you. You've sat in maybe these very seats and heard hundreds of messages. But there's something different about today. Not about me or not about the space, but just about the presence of God. That something you really heard for the first time. Or maybe you've seen and see 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 and see, but then there's today you really see it. Or maybe your whole life you've wondered and wondered and wondered and wondered and wondered and wondered. And today you really recognize the wonder of God. You really see that God has an angel army around you. So I have a plea and I have a prayer. My plea is for you to recognize that there are more with us than there are with them. I'm desperate for you to know that today. And my prayer is that God would open your eyes. My prayer is that God would open your eyes and you would see the chariots. You'd see the horses. You'd see the presence of God. You'd see his strong right arm stretched out to help you today. To have the prophet Elisha's faith and hope and assurance and boldness. I pray that you would not see Jesus as a historical figure, but he would become a personal Savior. I pray the church would no longer just be an organization or a club or a social activity that you assign to Sunday morning, but the church would become a living body of Jesus on this earth. A plea and a prayer. And I pray that this is the place. This is Dothan. This is where you see God. Amen.